You will never practice law in this county again. I will personally see to it." The words cut through the courtroom like a blade. No microphone needed. Judge Cyrus Blanchard leaned forward on the bench, his knuckles white against the oak, his eyes fixed on the young black woman standing alone at the defense table. The gallery had gone silent. Even the court reporter's fingers had stopped moving. 24 years on this bench. 24 years of absolute control. And in all that time, no public defender, especially not one who looked like her, had ever dared read statute numbers back to him in open court. She didn't flinch. She didn't apologize. She simply picked up her pen and wrote something in a small black notebook. What Judge Blanchard didn't know, what no one in that courtroom knew, was that 7 years later, she would be the one reading charges, not as a witness, not as a victim, as the federal prosecutor who would end his career. The bailiff moved first. A big man, ex-military, badge number 44-118, catching the fluorescent light as he stepped toward the defense table. "Counselor," his voice was low. "Judge says you're done." She closed the notebook, slipped it into her briefcase, and when she finally looked up at the bench, her expression held something that made the bailiff pause mid-step. Not fear, not anger, recognition. As if she were memorizing every detail of this moment for a purpose none of them could yet understand. "Case number 2017 CR 05891, she said, her voice steady. "October 14th, 2017, 2:47 p.m. I'm documenting this for the record." Blanchard's jaw tightened. "Get her out of my courtroom." The bailiff's hand closed around her arm, too hard, fingers digging into muscle. She didn't resist, didn't cry out, just turned her head slightly, noting his grip, his badge, the angle of his body blocking the gallery's view. The doors swung shut behind her. And in the silence that followed, Judge Cyrus Blanchard made the worst mistake of his 24-year career. He smiled. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button, because what satisfies you next will satisfy everything. 7 years earlier, before the federal investigation, before the grand jury, before her name appeared on indictments that would shake the Ohio judiciary to its foundation, Salome Waverly was just trying to survive her 3rd year as a public defender. The Hamilton County Public Defender's Office occupied the 4th floor of a building that smelled permanently of burnt coffee and desperation. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Filing cabinets lined every available wall, stuffed with cases that multiplied faster than anyone could process them. Salome's desk sat in the corner, wedged between a broken copier and a window that hadn't opened since the Clinton administration. She'd decorated it with exactly nothing. No photos, no plants, no inspirational quotes, just stacks of case files organized by colored tabs in a system only she understood. Green for pending motions, yellow for discovery requests, red for trials within 30 days, blue for cases she'd already lost. There was a lot of blue. "Waverly," a voice from across the room. Senior Attorney Gerald Hoffman, 53, permanent coffee stain on his tie, 26 years in the office. "You got the Avery file?" She didn't look up. "On my desk. Green tab. Motion to dismiss is drafted." Motion to dismiss. Hoffman walked over, picked up the file, flipped through it. "It's a car theft case, open and shut. Single eyewitness identification, no fingerprints, no surveillance footage. The witness is the vehicle owner's neighbor who saw a black male in a hoodie from 40 feet away at night." Salome finally met his eyes. "My client is 6'3". The neighbor described someone 5'8". That's a 7-inch discrepancy." Hoffman stared at her for a long moment. Then he tossed the file back on her desk. "You file like you're building a federal case, Waverly." She didn't respond to that, just picked up her highlighter and went back to work. The comment stayed with her, though, not as an insult, as a reminder. Every case mattered, every detail mattered, because for her clients, mostly poor, mostly black, mostly facing a system that had already decided their guilt, she was often the only thing standing between them and a conviction that would follow them for the rest of their lives. At 12:15, she ate lunch at her desk. Turkey sandwich, no mayo, apple she'd grabbed from the break room. She didn't take lunch breaks. Lunch breaks were for attorneys who didn't have 180 active cases. Salome, another voice. This one softer. Keisha Williams, fellow PD, 2 years ahead of her. You see the assignment sheet? Salome pulled up the internal system on her computer, scrolled to her name. State V. Marcus Avery. Courtroom 4B. Judge Cyrus Blanchard. Her stomach tightened. Blanchard, Keisha said, reading over her shoulder. Third time this month he's gotten one of yours. Random assignment. Random. Keisha's voice was flat. Sure. Everyone in the office knew about Judge Blanchard. 24 years on the bench. Hamilton County Court of Common Pleas. Respected by the legal establishment. Feared by public defenders, especially public defenders who looked like Salome. There were stories, whispered in break rooms, shared over drinks after particularly bad days. The way Blanchard interrupted black attorneys mid-sentence. The way he sustained every prosecution objection while overruling defense motions without explanation. The way defendants of color received consistently longer sentences in his courtroom. No one had ever filed a formal complaint. No one who wanted to keep practicing in Hamilton County anyway. You want me to take it? Keisha offered. I've got room on my docket. Salome shook her head. Marcus Avery is my client. I'm not passing him off because a judge doesn't like the way I look. Keisha didn't argue. She'd known Salome long enough to recognize that particular tone. Just be careful. Blanchard's got friends, everywhere. Salome nodded, but careful wasn't really in her vocabulary. Not when it came to her clients. The first hearing was scheduled for 9 a.m. on a Tuesday. Salome arrived at 8:15. She always arrived early. Early meant time to review notes, time to observe, time to notice which prosecutors chatted with which judges, which bailiffs gave which attorneys extra scrutiny, which clerks lost which filings. The Hamilton County Courthouse was a monument to Ohio judicial tradition. Marble floors, wood-paneled walls, portraits of former judges lining every hallway. All white, all male, all staring down with expressions that suggested they found the current state of affairs somewhat disappointing. Salome walked past them without looking. Courtroom 4B sat at the end of the third-floor corridor. She pushed through the heavy doors and found the gallery empty, the bench unoccupied, the prosecution table already set up with files and folders. Assistant District Attorney Fletcher Morse was there. Early, like her, 42 years old, prematurely gray, known throughout the courthouse for his conviction rate and his complete lack of interest in exculpatory evidence. He looked up when she entered. Waverly. Not hostile, not friendly. The tone of a man acknowledging furniture. Counselor? She set her briefcase on the defense table, began arranging her materials. Discovery response was due last Friday. I haven't received it. Must be in the mail. I submitted the request electronically. Response should have been electronic. Morse smiled, the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. I'll check with my office. These things happen. These things happened a lot, Salome had noticed, but only to certain attorneys. The doors opened again. Bailiff Boyce Telford entered, 6'2", 230 pounds, former military. The posture was unmistakable. He positioned himself near the side entrance, arms crossed, eyes scanning the room like he was expecting an insurgent attack rather than a preliminary hearing. His gaze landed on Salome, stayed there. She didn't acknowledge him, just continued organizing her files. Counsel? She looked up. Telford had moved closer, now standing beside the defense table. New security protocol. All attorneys need to check in at the desk before entering. Didn't see you on the list. I checked in at the main entrance. Metal detector, bag search, same as always. Courtroom 4B has additional requirements. Judge Blanchard's orders. Salome kept her voice even. I've been in this courtroom 6 times this year. This is the first I'm hearing about additional requirements. Telford's expression didn't change. Policy just started. You'll need to check in at the security desk downstairs. Every time. And if I've already cleared security, then you clear it again. Across the room, Morse watched the exchange with the faint interest of a man watching a nature documentary. Predator. Prey. The natural order of things.
This is a fun place for everyone to
Salome
discover the
held
great things
Telford's
about
gaze
modern
for
technology
3 full
in the fields
seconds.
of agriculture,
Then she picked
animal
up her
husbandry,
briefcase.
processing technology,
I'll be
and
back in
much
10
more.
minutes.
In this channel, we'll
She
explore
walked out of the
together how
courtroom,
modern
down the
agricultural
corridor,
machinery
down
works.
2 flights of
Modern
stairs,
agricultural
to a
production
security desk she had
processes
never
and
been
production
required to
lines
visit before.
4.0.
The
Subscribe
officer
to our
there looked
channel and
confused.
7 Discovery, so you
Courtroom
don't miss
4B,
the
additional
latest
clearance?
videos released
Ma'am,
daily,
I don't know what you're talking
featuring
about.
big
There's no such.
machines and the
Check your
most modern
protocols.
farming
He
equipment.
checked, scrolled
Wish you
through
have
his
a great
computer,
relaxing
frowned.
moment on this channel.
Nothing
And
here
you
about
will be
4B.
updated with the
You
latest
sure someone
inventions
didn't just.
applied in agriculture.
I'm sure. Salome turned and walked back upstairs. Telford was waiting exactly where she'd left him. All clear? There is no additional protocol, she said. I checked. Something flickered in his eyes. Amusement, maybe, or satisfaction. Must have been a miscommunication. My apologies, counselor. He didn't move aside. She had to walk around him to reach the defense table. By then, the gallery had begun filling. Marcus Avery's mother sat in the front row, small woman, worn hands, the exhausted dignity of someone who had spent too many years watching systems fail her family. Salome caught her eye, nodded once. Mrs. Avery nodded back, and then the side door opened, and Judge Cyrus Blanchard took the bench. 61 years old, silver hair. The confident bearing of a man who had never questioned his own judgment in his life. He settled into his chair, surveyed the courtroom like a king examining his domain, and his gaze landed on Salome. It lingered. Counsel, he said, state your appearance for the record. She stood. Salome Waverly for the defense, Your Honor. Waverly. He said the name slowly, as if testing how it felt in his mouth. You're the one who filed the motion to dismiss. Yes, Your Honor, on grounds of insufficient evidence and unreliable eyewitness identification. I've read your motion. He didn't look at it. Denied. The word landed like a gavel strike. No discussion, no explanation, just denial. Your Honor, I'd like to make an argument on the record. Motion is denied, young lady. We're proceeding to preliminary hearing. Young lady, not counselor, not Ms. Waverly. Young lady. Salome felt the heat rise in her chest, pushed it down. This wasn't her first dismissive judge. It wouldn't be her last. Understood, Your Honor. Defense is ready to proceed. The hearing lasted 47 minutes. In that time, Blanchard sustained every one of Morse's objections. He overruled 4 of Salome's. He interrupted her cross-examination of the eyewitness 3 times to clarify points that needed no clarification. And when she cited Ohio Revised Code, Section 2901.05 regarding burden of proof, he cut her off mid-sentence. Counsel is not here to lecture this court on the law. The words hung in the air. Salome set down her notes, took a breath. I apologize, Your Honor. I was simply referencing the relevant statute for— Move on, counselor. She moved on. What choice did she have? When the hearing concluded, Blanchard bound Marcus Avery over for trial. Bail was set at $50,000, impossibly high for a car theft charge, impossibly high for a family that counted every dollar. Mrs. Avery's face crumpled. Silent tears ran down her cheeks. Marcus, in his orange jumpsuit, looked at Salome with the eyes of a young man who had just learned what the justice system really meant for people like him. She gathered her files, said nothing. There was nothing to say that would help, but as she walked toward the exit, she opened her small black notebook and began to write. Date, time, case number, statements made, objections ruled, patterns observed. Fletcher Morse watched her go, that same faint smile on his face. Telford watched too. His expression was harder to read, and on the bench, Judge Blanchard was already calling the next case. Just another Tuesday in courtroom 4B. The documentation began that night. Salome sat at her kitchen table. Small apartment, bare walls, the minimum furniture required for living, with her black notebook open and her laptop beside it. She created a spreadsheet. Date, case number, judge, opposing counsel. Rulings, objections sustained versus overruled. Sentence recommendations versus actual sentences. Demographic information where available. It was tedious work. The kind of work that no one would ever thank her for. But she'd learned something in law school that most of her classmates had forgotten. Patterns were power, and patterns required data. By 2 a.m., she had entries for every case she'd handled in Blanchard's courtroom. By 3, she had pulled public records for cases handled by other public defenders. The numbers told a story. Objection. Sustain rate for prosecution in Blanchard's court, 87%. Objection sustain rate for defense, 34%. Average sentence for black defendants versus white defendants for comparable crimes, 23% longer. Motion to dismiss granted for prosecution, 12 in the past year. Motion to dismiss granted for defense, 1 out of 47 filed. Salome stared at the screen until her eyes burned. Then she saved the file, encrypted it, backed it up to 3 separate locations. She didn't know what she would do with this information yet, didn't know if she could do anything, but she knew she couldn't stop collecting it. 2 weeks passed, then 3. Salome won the motion to dismiss for Marcus Avery. Not in Blanchard's courtroom. She'd filed an emergency motion for change of venue, citing procedural irregularities, and somehow it had been granted. A different judge reviewed the evidence, agreed the eyewitness identification was fatally flawed, and dismissed the charges. Marcus Avery went home to his mother. Salome allowed herself exactly 1 moment of satisfaction. Then she opened her notebook and began preparing for her next case. The retaliation started 3 days later. First sign, an email from the Hamilton County Court Administrator's Office. Her cases had been reassigned due to scheduling conflicts. 3 cases, all moved to Blanchard's courtroom. Second sign, a voicemail from the Ohio State Bar Association. Ms. Waverly, this is a courtesy notification that a complaint has been filed against you. Please contact our office at your earliest convenience. She called immediately. I'm sorry, Ms. Waverly, the complaint is confidential at this stage, but I can tell you it alleges professional misconduct, specifically dilatory tactics and disrespectful conduct toward the court. Who filed the complaint? That information is also confidential. When was it filed? A pause. October 18th. 4 days after the Avery hearing. Salome hung up, sat very still for a very long time. Then she opened her notebook and wrote, October 22nd, 2017. Bar complaint filed. Allegations, dilatory tactics, disrespect. Filed 4 days after Avery hearing. Complainant identity concealed. Pattern. Retaliation? She didn't know yet, but she would find out. The complaint documents arrived by certified mail 1 week later. Salome spread them across her kitchen table and read every word. Complaint number 2017, OSB 10142. In the matter of Salome Waverly, escritural allegations. On or about October 14, 2017, respondent engaged in conduct unbecoming an officer of the court, including but not limited to filing frivolous motions designed to delay proceedings, demonstrating disrespect toward the presiding judge, and exhibiting unprofessional demeanor in the presence of clients and court personnel. The language was formal, legal, and familiar. She'd heard these exact phrases before. In courtroom 4B, from the bench. The complaint included 3 witness statements, all unsigned, all describing events that had allegedly occurred during the Avery hearing. None of the descriptions matched what had actually happened. Salome pulled out her notebook, compared her contemporaneous notes to the complaint allegations. Allegation: respondent raised her voice at the presiding judge. Her notes: spoke in normal courtroom voice, did not raise volume at any point. Court reporter can verify from transcript. Allegation: respondent filed motion to dismiss containing numerous factual errors. Her notes: motion cited 7 specific evidentiary deficiencies, all verified. Motion later granted by different judge. Allegation: respondent created a hostile atmosphere that disrupted court proceedings. Her notes: judge interrupted cross-examination 3 times. Sustained all prosecution objections. Denied all defense motions without discussion. Someone had manufactured a complaint designed to destroy her career, and she had a very good idea who. If you're watching this far, drop a comment, because what satisfies you next will satisfy everything. The next Monday, Salome walked into the public defender's office and found her supervisor waiting at her desk. Gerald Hoffman sat in her chair, case files spread before him, expression unreadable. Waverly, we need to talk. She set down her briefcase. About what? The bar complaint. He didn't look surprised that she knew. Director got a call from the courthouse. Apparently you've been causing problems. I've been representing my clients. Same thing, apparently. He gestured to the visitor's chair. Sit. She sat. Look, Hoffman said, his voice dropping. I've been doing this a long time, long enough to know how things work. There are judges you push and judges you don't. Blanchard is one you don't. He's violating my client's rights. Maybe. Probably. But he's also got 24 years on the bench, connections to every power structure in this county, and a memory like an elephant with a grudge. Hoffman leaned forward. You win the Avery case. Congratulations. But now you've got a target on your back. Is one case worth your career? Salome met his eyes. Marcus Avery would have gone to prison for a crime he didn't commit. He would have lost his job, his apartment, his chance at a future. His mother would have lost her son. So yes, one case is worth whatever comes next. Hoffman studied her for a long moment. You're good, Waverly. One of the best I've seen come through here. But good doesn't protect you. Not from people like Blanchard. Then what does? He didn't have an answer for that. So, the second complaint arrived 2 weeks later, then the third, each one more detailed than the last, each one alleging a different form of misconduct, each one supported by witness statements from people who worked in Blanchard's courthouse. Ginger Hartwell, court administrator. Statement: Ms. Waverly has repeatedly missed filing deadlines and demonstrated inability to manage her caseload. Salome's records showed she had never missed a deadline in 3 years. Fletcher Morse, Assistant District Attorney. Statement: I have observed Ms. Waverly behave erratically in court, including raising her voice and making inappropriate gestures. She had never raised her voice. She had never made any gesture other than standard courtroom procedure. Deputy Arden Colby, Sheriff's Liaison. Statement: Ms. Waverly has been observed behaving suspiciously in courthouse common areas, taking photographs and making notes of security procedures. She had taken exactly 0 photographs. The notes were in her black notebook. Case information, nothing more. 3 complaints, 7 witness statements. TAS, all fabricated, all designed to end her career. And she knew with absolute certainty, that fighting them individually would be useless. The system protected its own. The people filing these complaints had power, connections, institutional backing. She had a notebook and a spreadsheet. But she also had something else. She had the truth, and she was too stubborn to stop documenting it. The physical confrontation happened on a Tuesday in March. Salome had stayed late at the office, reviewing case files for a trial the next morning. By 9 p.m., the building was empty. Security lights cast long shadows down the corridors. The only sound was the hum of the heating system. She heard the footsteps before she saw him. Heavy, deliberate, the rhythm of someone who wanted to be heard. She looked up from her desk. Boyce Telford stood in the doorway of the public defender's office, out of uniform, civilian clothes, no badge visible. "Working late, counselor?" Salome's hand moved toward her phone. Stopped. She didn't want to show fear. "The building's closed," she said. "How did you get in?" Telford smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "I know people." He stepped inside. The door swung shut behind him. The office suddenly felt very small. "I've been watching you," Telford said, walking slowly between the empty desks. "Taking your notes. Building your little files. You think nobody notices, but we notice. We all notice." Salome stood. "Put the desk between them. If you have something to say, say it. Just giving you some friendly advice." He stopped 3 feet away, close enough that she could smell cigarette smoke and something metallic. "Some people don't know when to stop. They keep pushing, keep digging, and bad things happen to people like that." "Are you threatening me?" "I'm advising you." Another step closer. "The complaints? That's just paperwork, annoyance. But if you keep going..." He leaned in. "There are other ways to handle problems." Salome reached for her phone. This time she didn't hesitate. Telford's hand shot out. The impact caught her wrist. Hard, sudden, painful. Her phone clattered to the floor. For one long second, they stood frozen. His grip on her wrist, her back against the desk, his face inches from hers. "You should be more careful," he whispered. "Accidents happen." Then he released her, stepped back, smiled again. "Have a good night, counselor." He walked out. Salome stood motionless until she heard the stairwell door close. Then she picked up her phone with shaking hands and dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency?" "I want to report a threat and an assault. My name is Salome Waverly. I'm an attorney at the Hamilton County Public Defender's Office, 230 East 9th Street. A man just entered my workplace after hours and physically grabbed me while making threatening statements." "Are you safe now, ma'am?" "He left. But I'm not safe. I haven't been safe for months." She gave the dispatcher the details. Badge number 4418. Name, Boyce Telford. Court bailiff. Physical description. A unit arrived 23 minutes later. The officers took her statement, noted the redness on her wrist where Telford had grabbed her, photographed the injury. "We'll file a report," one of them said. But what?" The officer shifted uncomfortably. "Telford's got friends in the department. This might not go anywhere." "I understand." She did understand. That was the worst part. That night she added to her notebook, March 14th, 2018. 9:47 p.m. Telford appeared at office, out of uniform, threatened. "Bad things happen. Grabbed my wrist when I reached for phone. Bruising visible. 911 call made. Case ID 2018-03 Omforforn 2247. Officers responded. Badge numbers 11847 and 22231. Report filed. Officer warned case might not go anywhere." Below that, she wrote, "Evidence preserved. Pattern documented. I am not stopping." The Bar Association hearing took place in May. 3-member panel. Professional setting. The appearance of fairness. But Salome had done her research. 2 of the 3 panel members served on the same Bar Foundation committee as Judge Blanchard. They attended the same fundraisers. Their names appeared in the same donor registries. She objected to the composition of the panel. Objection denied. She requested recusal of the 2 members with apparent conflicts of interest. Request denied. She presented her evidence anyway. 47 pages of documentation. Timeline of events. Analysis of complaint patterns. Comparison of her contemporaneous notes with the allegations. Fletcher Morse appeared as a witness to professional conduct. He described events that had never happened with the confidence of a man who knew no one would challenge him. Ginger Hartwell testified by written statement. So did Arden Colby. Salome cross-examined where she could, asked pointed questions, highlighted inconsistencies. The panel listened politely. Then they deliberated for 43 minutes and returned with their decision. In the matter of complaint numbers 2017 OSBA 1142, 2017 OSBA 1298, and 2018 OSBA 0156, the panel finds that Respondent Salome Waverly engaged in conduct that, while not rising to the level of disbarment, warrants formal reprimand. Respondent is hereby ordered to complete 20 hours of professional conduct training and submit monthly reports to this body for a period of 12 months. Not disbarred, but damaged. The reprimand would follow her. Every future employer would see it. Every opposing counsel would know about it. Every judge who wanted to dismiss her arguments would have ammunition. Her career wasn't over, but it had been wounded in ways that might never fully heal. Outside the hearing room, she stood alone in the corridor. Marble floors, wood-paneled walls, portraits of former bar presidents staring down at her. All white, all male, all part of a system that had just shown her exactly how it protected its own. She opened her notebook. May 17, 2018. Bar hearing concluded. Reprimand with conditions. Panel composition. 2 members with ties to Blanchard. Objection to composition denied. Evidence presented but not meaningfully considered. Outcome predetermined. She closed the notebook. 2 weeks later, she submitted her resignation from the Hamilton County Public Defender's Office. The letter was brief. Dear Director Holloway, I hereby tender my resignation effective June 1, 2018. It has been an honor to serve the indigent clients of Hamilton County. I leave with gratitude for the experience, and with hope that someday the system will protect those who fight for it. Respectfully, Salome Waverly. She packed her desk in a single box. Case files returned to central storage. Personal items, there weren't many, placed carefully inside. The small black notebook went into her briefcase. That was coming with her. Keisha found her in the parking garage. Salome, wait. She turned. Where are you going? What are you going to do? I don't know yet. It was the truth. But I can't stay here. Not anymore. Keisha hugged her, tight. The kind of hug that said everything words couldn't. You were the best of us, she whispered. Don't let them make you forget that. Salome got in her car. She didn't look back at the courthouse. But she made herself a promise. Someday she would return. And when she did, she wouldn't be begging for justice. She would be delivering it. The phone call came 3 years later. Salome was in her second year at the Department of Justice, Civil Rights Division. Entry-level position. Long hours. The kind of work that built careers slowly, case by case, document by document. She'd rebuilt herself methodically. The reprimand still appeared on her record, but she'd added context. Letters of recommendation from law school professors, from the director of a legal aid clinic where she'd volunteered, from a federal judge who'd supervised her during a clerkship. The DOJ had hired her anyway. Waverly. Her supervisor appeared at her cubicle. Conference room B, 10 minutes. She gathered her notes, expecting another case assignment, another research project, another small piece of a larger puzzle. What she found was different. 3 people sat at the conference table. Her supervisor, a man she didn't recognize in FBI windbreaker, and a woman in a suit so perfectly tailored it practically screamed Main Justice. Ms. Waverly, please sit. She sat. My name is Patricia Emerson, Deputy Chief, Public Integrity Section. This is Special Agent Theo Langford, FBI. Public Integrity, the unit that investigated corruption among public officials, including judges. We'd like to discuss your time in Hamilton County, Emerson said. Specifically, your interactions with Judge Cyrus Blanchard. Salome's heart rate increased. She kept her face neutral. What would you like to know? Everything. Emerson slid a folder across the table. Because your name appears in 14 different complaint files we've collected over the past 18 months. And your case isn't the oldest, but it might be the best documented. Salome opened the folder. Inside, photocopies of her own notes, her spreadsheets, her analysis of ruling patterns and sentencing disparities. Where did you get these? A former colleague of yours, Langford said. Keisha Williams, she kept copies. Reached out to us 6 months ago. Keisha. Salome closed her eyes briefly, opened them. What exactly is the FBI investigating? Emerson leaned forward. Judge Cyrus Blanchard. 24 years of corruption, retaliation, and civil rights violations. We're building a federal case, and we want you to be part of the team. The room was silent. Salome looked at the folder. At the years of documentation she'd thought no one would ever see. I have a conflict of interest, she said. I was one of his victims. We know. Emerson's expression didn't change. We've reviewed the ethics considerations. Main Justice has determined that your prior experience makes you an asset, not a liability. Your documentation is evidence of the pattern. Your participation strengthens the case. And if his lawyers move to disqualify me? Then we fight it. But that's a bridge we'll cross when we come to it. Salome looked down at her hands, at the faint scar on her wrist where Telford's grip had left its mark. 3 years of waiting, 3 years of rebuilding, 3 years of wondering if any of it had mattered. And now this. I'm in, she said. Chuck. You're going to want to see what unfolds next. Subscribe and hit that bell so you won't miss part 2. The investigation took 4 years. 4 years of depositions, document requests, FOIA filings, witness interviews. 4 years of building a case so comprehensive that no defense attorney could dismantle it. Salome wasn't lead prosecutor at first. She started as a team member, then senior attorney, then deputy chief of the unit. Each promotion earned, each responsibility proven. By 2024, when the grand jury was finally impaneled, she had become the person she'd promised herself she would be. Assistant United States Attorney Salome Waverly, Public Integrity Section, Southern District of Ohio, the name on the indictment. The woman who would face Judge Cyrus Blanchard, not as a victim, not as a witness, but as the prosecutor who would end his career. The case file landed on her desk on a Monday in January. Outside her office window, Cincinnati stretched gray and cold under winter clouds. Inside, the familiar order of her workspace. Files organized by colored tabs, laptop open, coffee growing cold beside a stack of grand jury materials. A knock at her door. Ms. Waverly, the team's ready. She looked up. Theo Langford stood in the doorway, older now, gray at his temples, but still carrying the FBI windbreaker like a uniform. 5 minutes. He nodded. Yes, ma'am. The door closed. Salome turned back to the file before her. Case number 124CR00147, United States of America v. Cyrus Everett Blanchard. 24 years of corruption, condensed into 3 inches of paper. She opened the folder, read the summary she already knew by heart. Subject has served as judge, Hamilton County Court of Common Pleas since 2000. Investigation initiated following complaints from 14 former attorneys alleging pattern of retaliation, 7 defendants alleging wrongful conviction, and 3 court employees alleging witness tampering. 14 attorneys. She had been one of the first. Current status: grand jury impaneled. Indictment anticipated within 30 days. Salome closed the file, reached into her desk drawer, pulled out a small black notebook, worn at the edges, pages yellowed with time. She opened it to the first entry. October 14, 2017. 2:47 p.m. Held in contempt. Badge 4418. Blanchard stated, "Counsel will not lecture this court on the law. 7 years. 7 years since she'd written those words. 7 years since she'd walked out of courtroom 4B in handcuffs. 7 years since she'd promised herself that someday she would return. Someday was today. She slipped the notebook into her briefcase, gathered the case file, and walked to the conference room where her team was waiting. The hunt was finally over. Now came the reckoning. The conference room held 6 people: Langford and his FBI team, 2 junior attorneys from Salome's unit, and Patricia Emerson, now chief of the Public Integrity Section. Salome took her place at the head of the table. Status report. Langford pulled up a presentation. Grand jury has heard from 12 witnesses over the past 3 weeks. Financial records subpoenas have been fully complied with. We have bank records showing deposits totaling $847,000 from sources including Midwest Bail Bonds, LLC, Hamilton County Contractors Association, and 3 shell corporations traced to defendants in cases where Blanchard issued favorable rulings. Body cam footage? Recovered. Evidence Exhibit 14 shows Blanchard instructing Bailiff Boyce Telford to, quote, make sure she doesn't come back and handle it. Timestamp October 14, 2017. The day of her contempt. Salome kept her expression neutral. Email communications? Extensive. Langford clicked to the next slide. We have a chain dated March 12, 2018 between Court Administrator Ginger Hartwell and Blanchard's chambers. Subject line, R.E. Waverly situation. Content discusses coordinating bar complaints and ensuring she would be, quote, too busy defending herself to cause problems. Too busy defending herself. She remembered those months, the sleepless nights, the mounting complaints, the feeling that the walls were closing in from every direction. They had planned it, coordinated it, written it down, and now she had the receipts. Co-conspirators? We're recommending charges against 4 individuals in addition to Blanchard. Langford listed them. Boyce Telford, witness intimidation. Ginger Hartwell, conspiracy to obstruct justice. Fletcher Morse, currently cooperating, no charges recommended pending continued cooperation. Arden Colby, resigned, negotiating immunity in exchange for testimony. Morse was cooperating, the man who had filed false witness statements, who had smiled while her career burned. Now he was cutting deals to save himself. Justice, Salome had learned, was rarely clean. Anticipated defense strategy? Motion to disqualify you, Emerson said. Sterling Calhoun is representing Blanchard. He'll argue your prior history creates bias and an appearance of impropriety. Expected. Can you handle it? Salome met her superior's eyes. I've been preparing for this hearing for 7 years. Yes, I can handle it. Emerson studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Grand jury votes Thursday. If they return an indictment, when they return an indictment, we unseal immediately. Arraignment within 48 hours. This is going to move fast. I understand. Salome. Emerson's voice softened slightly. This isn't just about Blanchard. It's about every person he hurt, every career he destroyed, every defendant he railroaded. You carry their stories now. Make it count. Salome thought of Marcus Avery, the first client she'd saved in Blanchard's courtroom, of Keisha Williams, who had kept her documentation safe for years, of every public defender who had walked into courtroom 4B knowing the deck was stacked against them. I will. Thursday arrived. The grand jury room was windowless, fluorescent lit, utterly ordinary. 23 citizens seated in rows, legal pads before them, expressions ranging from curious to exhausted. Salome presented the evidence, methodically, thoroughly, the way she'd been trained, bank records showing unexplained deposits, email chains documenting coordination, body cam footage with Blanchard's own voice instructing his bailiff to handle a problem, witness testimony from attorneys who had been retaliated against, from defendants who had received excessive sentences, from court employees who had seen things they were afraid to report, and finally, her own story. On October 14, 2017, I was held in contempt of court by Judge Cyrus Blanchard for citing a statute during a preliminary hearing. I was physically removed from the courtroom and briefly detained. In the months that followed, I was the target of 3 bar complaints containing fabricated allegations, coordinated witness statements from individuals with ties to Judge Blanchard, and a physical threat from his bailiff. She paused. I resigned from the Hamilton County Public Defender's Office in June 2018. My career was significantly damaged, but I kept documentation of everything that happened, and that documentation, along with the testimony of 13 other attorneys who experienced similar treatment, forms the foundation of this case. The grand jury foreperson asked a question. Ms. Waverly, given your personal history with the defendant, how can you assure us of your objectivity? Fair question. Expected. I disclosed my prior interactions with Judge Blanchard immediately upon being assigned to this case. The Office of Professional Responsibility reviewed the facts and determined that my experience constitutes evidence of the pattern under investigation, not grounds for disqualification. My role is to present facts. The jury, both this grand jury and any trial jury, will determine guilt or innocence. More questions, more answers. By 4 p.m., the presentation was complete. By 4:37, the grand jury returned their vote. True bill. Indictment. United States of America versus Cyrus Everett Blanchard. 3 counts. Count 1. Deprivation of rights under color of law. 18 U.S.C. 242. Count 2. Witness tampering. 18 U.S.C. Section 11512b. 1. Count 3. Conspiracy to obstruct justice. 18 U.S.C. 11512c. 2. Salome walked out of the grand jury room with the indictment in her hands. 7 years. It had taken 7 years. But finally, justice was coming for Judge Cyrus Blanchard. The arrest happened at dawn. Salome wasn't there. Prosecutors didn't participate in arrests, but Langford sent her the details via secure message. 6:14 a.m. Subject taken into custody at residence. No resistance. Wife present. Subject stated, "This is a mistake. You have no idea who you're dealing with." No idea who they were dealing with. She almost smiled at that. He had no idea who he was dealing with. Not anymore. The arraignment was scheduled for the following Monday. Salome arrived early at the federal courthouse. Different building, different jurisdiction, different rules than the state court where Blanchard had ruled for 24 years. Here, he had no power, no connections, no decades of accumulated favors. Here, he was just another defendant. The courtroom filled slowly. Media in the gallery. This case had attracted attention. Blanchard's defense team at one table, led by Sterling Calhoun, silver-haired and expensive. The prosecution team at the other, led by Salome. And then the side door opened. Judge Cyrus Blanchard entered in handcuffs, orange jumpsuit, unshaven. The imperial bearing diminished but not destroyed. His eyes found Salome immediately. She watched him recognize her, watched the flicker of something. Surprise? Disbelief? Cross his face. The young public defender he had tried to destroy, now wearing the title of Assistant United States Attorney, now holding the indictment that would end his career. He looked away first. Salome didn't allow herself to feel satisfaction. Not yet. The case wasn't won. The trial hadn't happened. 1,000 things could still go wrong. But in that moment, that single moment when Cyrus Blanchard looked at her and understood what she had become, something shifted. The balance of power had changed, and it would never change back. Sterling Calhoun stood. "Your Honor, before we proceed to arraignment, defense moves to disqualify lead prosecutor Salome Waverly on grounds that her prior professional grievances against my client create an appearance of impropriety and potential bias." Expected. Prepared for. Salome rose. "Your Honor, I disclosed my prior interactions with Judge Blanchard immediately upon case assignment. The Office of Professional Responsibility reviewed the matter under 28 U.S.C. Chapter 455 and Department of Justice Ethics Guidelines. Their written determination, filed with this court, concludes that my documented experience constitutes evidence of the pattern under investigation, not grounds for disqualification. She handed the OPR memo to the court clerk. Mr. Calhoun's motion conflates two issues. First, whether I harbor personal bias. Second, whether my prior experience is relevant evidence. The answer to the first is no. I am bound by prosecutorial ethics to pursue justice, not vengeance. The answer to the second is yes, and that relevance strengthens rather than undermines this prosecution. Judge Eleanor Vance, Federal District Judge, no connection to Blanchard, assigned randomly, reviewed the memo. Mr. Calhoun, response? Calhoun spread his hands. Your Honor, the appearance of impropriety alone should be sufficient. Ms. Waverly was held in contempt by my client. She filed complaints against him. She resigned from her position allegedly due to his actions. How can any reasonable observer believe she approaches this case without prejudice? Because I am not the jury. Salome's voice was steady. I am the prosecutor. My job is to present evidence. The jury will determine guilt or innocence. If Mr. Calhoun believes any specific piece of evidence is tainted by bias, he is free to object at trial. But wholesale disqualification based on the mere fact that I was victimized by the defendant's alleged pattern of conduct would create a perverse incentive, harm enough people, and none of them can ever hold you accountable. The courtroom was silent. Judge Vance looked at the memo, at Calhoun, at Salome. Motion to disqualify is denied. Ms. Waverly has made full disclosure. Maine Justice has reviewed the ethics, and this court finds no basis for removal. We will proceed to arraignment. Calhoun sat down, expression tight. Blanchard stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. And Salome simply opened her folder and prepared to read the charges. Mr. Blanchard, you are charged in count 1 with deprivation of rights under color of law, in violation of 18 U.S.C. Sequels 242. The indictment alleges that from approximately 2005 to 2023, while acting under color of law as a state court judge, you willfully deprived individuals of their constitutional rights. She read every word, every charge, every allegation. And when she finished, Judge Vance turned to the defendant. Mr. Blanchard, how do you plead? Sterling Calhoun stood. Not guilty, Your Honor. On all counts. Expected. Very well. Trial is set for October 7th. Defendant is remanded to custody pending bail hearing tomorrow morning. Court is adjourned. The gavel fell. Blanchard was led away, still in handcuffs, still in his orange jumpsuit. He didn't look at Salome again. He didn't have to. They both knew what was coming. That night, Salome sat alone in her apartment. Different apartment now. Bigger. Better. The kind of place a federal prosecutor could afford. But she still had the same small black notebook. She opened it, turned to a fresh page. January 27th, 2024. Arraignment completed. Defendant pleaded not guilty. Motion to disqualify denied. Trial set for October. Below that, 7 years, 3 months, 13 days since contempt. Case is finally proceeding. She closed the notebook, picked up her phone, dialed a number she'd memorized years ago. Hello? Keisha, it's Salome. Silence. Then, I saw the news. Salome, you did it. We did it. You kept the documentation. You reached out to the FBI. Without you, there would have been nothing to keep. Keisha's voice cracked. All those years, all that work, I always knew it would matter someday. It matters now. They talked for an hour. About the case. About old colleagues. About the system that had failed them and the tiny cracks they had managed to create. When Salome finally hung up, she stood at her window, looking out at the city lights. The trial was months away. The fight was far from over, but for the first time in 7 years, she allowed herself to feel something she had almost forgotten: hope. The counterattack began 3 weeks before trial. Salome found the envelope on her desk at 7:15 a.m. No postmark, no return address, just her name typed in plain black letters. Inside, photographs. Photographs of her, entering her apartment building, walking to her car, buying coffee at the shop 2 blocks from the federal courthouse. Timestamps in the corner of each image, dates spanning the past month. Someone had been watching her. At the bottom of the stack, a single sheet of paper. 3 words, typed, "We see you." She didn't panic. Panic was a luxury she couldn't afford. Instead, she photographed every image, logged the envelope as evidence, and called Langford. "Someone's surveilling me. I need a security assessment." Within an hour, FBI technicians were sweeping her apartment, her car, her office. They found nothing. No bugs, no trackers, no devices. Which meant the surveillance was physical. Human. Someone following her, photographing her, documenting her movements. Someone sending a message. "Blanchard's people," Langford said, studying the photographs. "Has to be. Can we prove it?" "Not yet, but we're putting a detail on you. 2 agents, round the clock until trial concludes." Salome looked at the photographs spread across her desk, her face in each one, unaware, vulnerable. "They want me scared," she said. "Are you?" She met Langford's eyes. "I was scared 7 years ago, when Telford grabbed my wrist in an empty office, when I walked out of the courthouse knowing my career was over." She gathered the photographs, placed them back in the envelope. "I'm not scared anymore. I'm angry. And anger is useful." If you're watching this far, drop a comment, because what satisfies you next will satisfy everything. The pretrial motions came next. Sterling Calhoun filed 14 of them in a single week. Motion to suppress the body cam footage, denied. Motion to exclude financial records, denied. Motion for change of venue, denied. Motion to dismiss for prosecutorial misconduct, denied. Each motion required a response. Each response required hours of work. Salome's team operated on 4 hours of sleep and unlimited coffee. They reviewed every filing, drafted every brief, prepared for every hearing. And through it all, the surveillance photographs haunted her. She started taking different routes to work, varying her schedule, checking her mirrors constantly. The FBI detail shadowed her everywhere. 2 agents, rotating shifts, never more than 100 feet away. She hated needing them, but she understood why they were necessary. The first major break came from an unexpected source. Fletcher Morse, the ADA who had filed false witness statements against her, who had smiled while her career burned, wanted to talk. The meeting took place in a secure conference room at the federal courthouse. Morse sat on one side of the table, his attorney beside him. Salome sat on the other, Langford at her shoulder. Morse looked smaller than she remembered. Grayer. The confidence that had once radiated from him now seemed like a thin veneer over something fragile. "Ms. Waverly." He couldn't quite meet her eyes. "I understand you have questions." "I have many questions, Mr. Morse. But let's start with the most important one." She opened her folder. "In October 2017, you filed a witness statement with the Ohio State Bar Association alleging that I had behaved erratically in court, raised my voice, and made inappropriate gestures. None of those things happened. Why did you lie?" Morse's attorney leaned forward. "My client is prepared to provide truthful testimony regarding his interactions with Judge Blanchard in exchange for—" "I know what he wants." Salome's voice was flat. "I'm asking why he lied." Silence. Morse swallowed, finally looked at her. "Because Blanchard told me to." "Told you?" "He called me into his chambers the day after your contempt hearing. Said you were a problem. said problems needed to be managed, said if I wanted to keep winning cases in his courtroom, I needed to be part of the solution. And you agreed. I agreed. His voice cracked. I'm not proud of it, but you have to understand. Blanchard controlled everything. Case assignments, plea deals, sentencing recommendations. If you weren't on his side, you were on the outside, and the outside was a very cold place. Salome studied him. The tremor in his hands, the sweat on his forehead, the fear, genuine fear, in his eyes. 7 years ago, she would have hated him. Now she just felt tired. Who else was involved? And Fletcher Morse began to talk. His testimony filled in gaps they hadn't known existed. The coordination went deeper than they'd suspected. Blanchard hadn't just retaliated against Salome. He'd built a system, a network of court employees, prosecutors, and sheriff's deputies who worked together to protect him and punish anyone who challenged his authority. Ginger Hartwell managed the administrative side, case assignments, scheduling, making sure certain attorneys got certain judges. Boyce Telford handled physical intimidation. Not just Salome, a dozen other attorneys had received similar visits over the years. Arden Colby provided intelligence, sheriff's office connections, background checks on anyone Blanchard wanted to know about. And Fletcher Morse prosecuted the cases Blanchard wanted prosecuted, won the convictions Blanchard wanted won, filed the complaints Blanchard wanted filed. There were payments, Morse said. Not to me, I was just doing what I was told to keep my position. But Blanchard took money, from bail bondsmen who wanted favorable treatment, from contractors who had cases before his court, from defense attorneys who wanted their clients to get lighter sentences. Do you have documentation? Some. Blanchard was careful, but there were emails, conversations I overheard, deposits that didn't match his salary. Salome took notes, detailed notes, the kind of notes that would become exhibits at trial. When the interview concluded, she walked Morse to the door. Mr. Morse, one more question. He turned. Did you ever think about what happened to the people you helped convict, the ones who might have been innocent? He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The trial began on a gray October morning. Jury selection had taken 2 weeks. 12 citizens and 4 alternates, chosen from a pool of hundreds, each one questioned about their knowledge of the case, their opinions on judicial corruption, their ability to be impartial. Salome had watched each potential juror carefully, looking for bias, looking for connections, looking for anyone who might have been planted by Blanchard's network. In the end, they seated a jury that seemed fair as any jury could be. Now came the hard part. Opening statements set the tone. Sterling Calhoun went first. Defense had elected to make their opening immediately rather than reserve. Ladies and gentlemen, Judge Cyrus Blanchard dedicated 24 years of his life to public service. 24 years on the bench. 24 years of difficult decisions, unpopular rulings, and the kind of judicial courage that makes enemies. And now, those enemies have found a way to strike back. He gestured toward Salome. The lead prosecutor in this case, Ms. Waverly, was held in contempt by Judge Blanchard 7 years ago. She filed complaints against him. She resigned from her position. And now, by remarkable coincidence, she's the one bringing charges against him. You'll hear a lot of evidence in this trial, but I ask you to remember one thing. This case isn't about justice. It's about revenge. He sat down. Salome rose. Ladies and gentlemen, this case is about evidence, not revenge, not personal feelings. Evidence. She walked toward the jury box. Over the next several weeks, you will see bank records showing unexplained deposits totaling over $800,000 into accounts controlled by Judge Blanchard. You will hear testimony from 14 attorneys who were retaliated against for challenging his rulings. You will watch body cam footage in which Judge Blanchard instructs his bailiff to, quote, make sure she doesn't come back and handle it. She paused. Yes, I was one of his victims. I don't deny that. I was held in contempt for citing a statute. I was physically removed from his courtroom. I was the target of coordinated complaints that nearly destroyed my career. But I'm not asking you to believe me because I suffered. I'm asking you to believe the evidence, the documents, the recordings, the testimony of people who watched Judge Blanchard abuse his power for over 2 decades. She turned to face Blanchard directly. Mr. Calhoun calls this revenge. I call it accountability. And by the time this trial is over, you will know the difference. The evidence phase lasted 3 weeks. Salome called witnesses in careful sequence, building the case piece by piece, layer by layer. First, the pattern witnesses, attorneys who had experienced retaliation similar to hers, each one telling a story that echoed her own. Objections overruled without cause, contempt charges for minor infractions, mysterious bar complaints, career-ending reprimands. Marcus Avery's mother testified, described her son's terror during the preliminary hearing, the excessive bail, the way Blanchard had looked at him, like he'd already decided guilt before hearing a single word. Then the documentary evidence, bank records projected on screens, deposits traced to shell corporations traced to defendants in Blanchard's courtroom, email chains read aloud, Ginger Hartwell writing to Blanchard, "The bar complaint is filed. Fletcher says he has 2 more witnesses lined up. She'll be too busy defending herself to cause problems." The body cam footage. This was the moment Salome had been waiting for, the moment the jury would hear Blanchard's own voice. "Your Honor, the government calls FBI digital forensics specialist Raymond Chen to authenticate Evidence Exhibit 14. Chen took the stand, explained the chain of custody, the metadata verification, the timestamp analysis confirming the footage had not been altered. "Mr. Chen, please play the footage for the jury." The courtroom went silent. On the screen, a courthouse corridor. Date stamp October 14, 2017. Timestamp 2:52 p.m. 5 minutes after Salome had been removed from the courtroom. Blanchard's voice captured by a bailiff's body cam microphone. "Make sure she doesn't come back. I don't care how. Just handle it." Telford's response. "Understood, Your Honor." The footage ended. Salome let the silence hold for 5 seconds. 10. No further questions for this witness. Calhoun's cross-examination tried to create doubt. "Mr. Chen, is it possible that Judge Blanchard was referring to a different matter? A security concern, perhaps?" The footage doesn't provide context beyond what's shown. "So you can't say definitively what Judge Blanchard meant by handle it?" "No, sir." But the statement immediately followed the removal of defense attorney Salome Waverly from his courtroom. Move to strike as speculation. Overruled. Judge Vance's voice was firm. The witness is stating facts about timing, not speculating about intent. Calhoun sat down, expression tight. Small victory, but the trial was far from over. The defense case began in week 4. Character witnesses paraded through, former law clerks, bar association colleagues, other judges who spoke of Blanchard's judicial temperament and commitment to the law. None of them addressed the evidence. None of them could. Then Calhoun called his surprise witness. Defense calls Delia Rawlings. Salome's stomach dropped. Delia Rawlings, court reporter in Blanchard's courtroom for 15 years. One of the witnesses Salome had hoped to call herself, until Rawlings had stopped returning phone calls 3 weeks before trial. Now she understood why. Rawlings took the stand. 63 years old, silver hair, the worn dignity of someone who had spent decades recording other people's words. "Ms. Rawlings," Calhoun began, "you've worked in Judge Blanchard's courtroom since 2009. Is that correct?" "Yes, sir." "In that time, have you ever observed Judge Blanchard engage in the kind of corruption alleged by the prosecution?" "No, sir, never." "Have you ever seen him accept payments, coordinate retaliation against attorneys, instruct anyone to harm or intimidate witnesses?" "No, sir." "Did you observe the incident involving Ms. Waverly in October 2017? I did. And what did you observe? Rawlings hesitated. Just for a moment. Her eyes flickered toward Salome, then away. I observed Ms. Waverly raise her voice at Judge Blanchard. She was argumentative, disrespectful. The judge had no choice but to hold her in contempt. The words landed like physical blows. Salome kept her face neutral. But inside, something cracked. This was a lie. A deliberate, calculated lie from a witness who had been there, who had recorded every word on her stenograph machine. No further questions, Calhoun said. Judge Vance turned to the prosecution table. Cross-examination? Salome rose slowly. Ms. Rawlings, you mentioned you've been a court reporter since 2009. That's 15 years in Judge Blanchard's courtroom. Is that correct? Yes. In that time, have you ever been promoted, received a raise outside the standard schedule, been given preferential assignments? Rawlings shifted. I've received standard compensation. Standard compensation. Salome picked up a document. Ms. Rawlings, I'm showing you what has been marked as Government Exhibit 47. This is a payroll record from Hamilton County showing a series of supplemental payments to court reporting staff. Do you recognize your name on this document? Calhoun stood. Objection. This exhibit wasn't disclosed in discovery. It was disclosed 3 days ago, Your Honor, after we obtained it through supplemental subpoena. Overruled. The witness may answer. Rawlings looked at the document. Her face paled. Ms. Rawlings, according to this record, you received supplemental payments totaling $47,000 over the past 5 years. Can you explain the source of these payments? They were overtime, for complex cases. Overtime. Salome pulled up another document. Ms. Rawlings, I'm showing you Government Exhibit 48. This is your official overtime log from the same 5-year period. According to this log, you worked a total of 112 overtime hours, which at your hourly rate would equal approximately $6,000. How do you explain the $41,000 discrepancy? Silence. Ms. Rawlings? I don't remember. You don't remember receiving $41,000? Objection? Badgering. Withdrawn. Salome turned to the jury. Ms. Rawlings, one final question. You testified that you observed me raise my voice at Judge Blanchard. Do you still have the stenograph record from that hearing? Another pause, longer this time. The record was archived. Archived, meaning it still exists? I believe so. Your Honor, the government moves to subpoena the original stenograph record from the October 14, 2017 hearing in Case 2017 CR 05891. Calhoun was on his feet. Your Honor, this is improper. The witness testified about events she recorded. The defense opened this door. Motion granted. Judge Vance turned to Rawlings. Ms. Rawlings, you will provide the original stenograph record to this court within 48 hours. Do you understand? Rawlings nodded. Her hands were shaking. No further questions, Salome said. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button, because what satisfies you next will satisfy everything. The stenograph record arrived the next morning. Salome read it 3 times, then called an emergency hearing. Your Honor, the government has reviewed the stenograph record from October 14, 2017. The record directly contradicts Ms. Rawlings' testimony. At no point during the hearing did I raise my voice. The record shows I spoke at normal volume, citing Ohio Revised Code Section 149.43 regarding public records retention. The only raised voice captured belongs to Judge Blanchard, who stated, and I quote, "Counsel will not lecture this court on the law." She handed copies to the judge, to Calhoun, to the court clerk. The government moves to charge Delia Rawlings with perjury under 18 U.S.C. Section 1621 and to strike her testimony from the record. Calhoun's face had gone gray. Judge Vance reviewed the documents. Her expression was unreadable. The motion to strike is granted. The jury will be instructed to disregard Ms. Rawlings' testimony in its entirety. As for the perjury charge, she looked at Rawlings, who sat in the gallery, trembling. That matter will be referred to the appropriate authorities. Ms. Rawlings, you are advised to retain counsel immediately. Rawlings began to cry. Salome felt nothing. This was what the system did to people. Blanchard had corrupted everyone around him, even people who might otherwise have been decent. And when his corruption was exposed, they were the ones who suffered. The powerful protected themselves. The vulnerable paid the price. It was the oldest story in the world. Closing arguments came on a Friday. Calhoun went first, spent an hour trying to create reasonable doubt, attacking the credibility of witnesses, questioning the chain of custody for evidence, suggesting that Salome's personal vendetta had tainted the entire investigation. It was a good closing, professional, thorough, but it couldn't overcome the evidence. When Salome rose, she didn't use notes. Ladies and gentlemen, over the past 4 weeks, you've seen something rare. You've seen behind the curtain of power. You've seen how a judge, someone entrusted with the sacred duty of dispensing justice, can instead dispense punishment. Punishment to attorneys who challenged him, to defendants who couldn't afford expensive lawyers, to anyone who threatened his control. She walked toward the jury box. You've heard Mr. Calhoun suggest this is about revenge, that I brought this case because of what happened to me 7 years ago. Let me be clear, what happened to me matters. It matters because it happened to 14 other attorneys. It matters because it happened to countless defendants who received excessive sentences or wrongful convictions. It matters because one man was allowed to operate above the law for 24 years, and no one stopped him. She paused. But this case isn't about me. It's about accountability. It's about the principle that no one, not a bailiff, not a prosecutor, not a judge, is above the law. The evidence shows that Cyrus Blanchard accepted payments for favorable rulings, that he coordinated retaliation against attorneys who challenged him, that he instructed his bailiff to handle anyone who got in his way. She turned to face Blanchard. For 24 years, he sat on that bench and decided who was guilty and who was innocent, who deserved mercy and who deserved punishment. Today, you get to make that decision about him. And I trust, I believe, that you will choose accountability, that you will choose justice, that you will show Judge Blanchard what he never showed the people in his courtroom. The law applies to everyone. She sat down. The jury was excused to deliberate. They returned in 7 hours, the fastest federal corruption verdict in the district's history. Salome stood as the foreperson rose. On count 1, deprivation of rights under color of law, we the jury find the defendant guilty. The gallery erupted. Judge Vance's gavel struck repeatedly. Order! Order in the court! On count 2, witness tampering, we the jury find the defendant guilty. More noise. More gaveling. On count 3, conspiracy to obstruct justice, we the jury find the defendant guilty. Guilty on all counts. Salome closed her eyes, just for a moment. 7 years. 7 years of documentation. 7 years of rebuilding. 7 years of waiting. And now, finally, a verdict. She opened her eyes. Across the courtroom, Cyrus Blanchard sat motionless. His face was gray. His hands, clasped on the table before him, trembled slightly. 24 years of absolute power, ended by a single word, repeated 3 times. Guilty. The sentencing hearing was scheduled for December. In the meantime, the other dominoes fell. Boyce Telford pleaded guilty to witness intimidation, sentenced to 12 months in federal custody. Ginger Hartwell pleaded guilty to conspiracy to obstruct justice, 2 years probation, 200 hours of community service. Delia Rawlings was charged with perjury. Her case was pending. Fletcher Morse's cooperation agreement was finalized. No charges in exchange for testimony. He resigned from the district attorney's office and surrendered his law license. Arden Colby received immunity. He testified against Blanchard, then transferred to a sheriff's office 3 counties away. And through it all, the surveillance photographs remained unexplained. No one claimed responsibility. No one was caught. They were a reminder. Even with Blanchard convicted, the system that had protected him was still intact. Some battles took longer than others. The sentencing hearing arrived on a cold December morning. Salome submitted her recommendation: 72 to 87 months, the high end of the federal guidelines, appropriate for a defendant who had abused public trust for over 2 decades. Calhoun submitted his, 18 months. Judge Blanchard is 61 years old. He has no prior criminal record. He has served his community for 24 years. A lengthy sentence serves no purpose other than vengeance. Victim impact statements were read aloud. Attorneys who had lost careers, defendants who had lost years of their lives, families who had lost faith in the justice system. Marcus Avery's mother spoke, quietly, carefully, describing how her son had been treated in Blanchard's courtroom, how she had watched him be led away in handcuffs, knowing he was innocent, knowing no one would believe them. "I thought the law was supposed to protect us," she said. But in his courtroom, it only protected him. When it was Salome's turn to speak, she kept it brief. "Your Honor, the government has presented evidence of systematic corruption spanning 2 decades. Judge Blanchard used his position not to serve justice, but to accumulate power. He punished those who challenged him and rewarded those who served him. A sentence at the high end of the guidelines sends a message. This behavior will not be tolerated, not from anyone." She sat down. Judge Vance reviewed her notes, looked at Blanchard. "Mr. Blanchard, do you wish to make a statement?" He rose slowly. The arrogance was gone now. What remained was smaller, older. "Your Honor, I dedicated my life to the law. Everything I did, I believed, was in service of justice. If I made mistakes..." He paused. "I regret any harm caused." That was it. No apology, no acknowledgement of wrongdoing, just regret for any harm caused, as if the harm had happened on its own. Judge Vance nodded. "I have considered the sentencing recommendations, the victim impact statements, and the defendant's statement. Mr. Blanchard, you occupied a position of immense public trust. You were charged with dispensing justice, and instead, you dispensed punishment to anyone who threatened your power. The evidence presented at trial demonstrated a pattern of corruption, retaliation, and abuse that extended for over 20 years. She paused. "However, I must also consider the federal sentencing guidelines, the defendant's age, and the principle that punishment should be proportionate to the offense. Accordingly, I sentence you to 24 months in federal custody, to be followed by 3 years of supervised release. You are permanently barred from holding any judicial office or practicing law in any jurisdiction. This sentence is effective immediately." 24 months. Less than Salome had hoped, more than Calhoun had asked. A compromise. Like most things in the justice system. Blanchard was led away in handcuffs, the same handcuffs that had been placed on Salome 7 years ago, in his courtroom, on his orders. She watched him go, and felt, not satisfaction, not victory, something quieter, closure. Chapter 8. The letter from Marcus Avery arrived the following week. Salome found it in her mailbox. Actual paper mail, handwritten, the envelope slightly crumpled from its journey through the postal system. She opened it carefully. "Dear Ms. Waverly, I saw the news. After all these years, I never forgot what you did for me. You believed me when no one else did. You stood up for me when it would have been easier to stay quiet. You lost your job because of my case. I always felt guilty about that. I'm doing okay now. Got my GED, working at a warehouse, trying to save up for community college. My mom says I should study criminal justice, maybe become a lawyer someday. She says the system needs more people like you. I know you probably don't remember me, but I remember you. Every time someone treats me unfairly, I think about how you stood in that courtroom and told the truth, even when it cost you everything. Thank you for not giving up. Marcus Avery. Salome read the letter 3 times. Then she set it down, walked to her window, and looked out at the city. She thought about Marcus at 19, scared, confused, facing a system that had already decided he was guilty. She thought about Marcus now, working, studying, dreaming of a future. One case, one client, one moment of choosing to fight instead of surrender. That was what mattered, not the conviction of Cyrus Blanchard, not the vindication of her own reputation. Just this, a young man who had been given a chance, who had taken that chance and built something with it. She folded the letter carefully and placed it in her desk drawer, next to her small black notebook. You're going to want to see what unfolds next. Subscribe and hit that bell so you won't miss what's coming. The anonymous email arrived on the last day of the year. Salome was alone in her office, reviewing case files for January, when her computer chimed with an incoming message. Sender: unknown. Subject: you think it's over? She should have forwarded it to a T security immediately. Should have let Langford's team analyze it for threats. Instead, she opened it. The body contained a single attachment, a PDF file. She downloaded it, opened it, and stopped breathing. It was Government Exhibit 47, the redacted email from the Blanchard case. The one with the sender's name blacked out. The one that had mentioned the Waverly problem and recommended escalation to. But this version wasn't redacted. The sender's name was clearly visible. Salome read it again, and felt the floor shift beneath her feet. The name was familiar, very familiar. A name that had appeared in newspapers, in press conferences, in campaign materials. A name that belonged to someone currently serving in the Ohio State Legislature. Someone who had been on the Judiciary Committee for the past 12 years. Someone who had voted to confirm Cyrus Blanchard to the bench. Someone who had, apparently, been coordinating with him all along. Salome stared at the screen. The Blanchard case had been closed, the conviction secured, the sentence handed down. But this was bigger. This wasn't one corrupt judge. This was a network. Her phone rang. She answered without thinking. Ms. Waverly? The voice was distorted, electronically altered. You did good work on Blanchard, but he was just the beginning. Who is this? Someone who wants the same thing you do. Justice. How did you get this document? The original was classified. Classified by whom? That's the question you should be asking. There are people in Columbus who have been protecting Blanchard for years. People who have a lot to lose if the investigation continues. Why are you telling me this? A pause. Because 7 years ago, you stood in a courtroom and told the truth when it cost you everything. I need to know if you'll do it again. The line went dead. Salome sat in the silence. Outside her window, fireworks exploded over the Cincinnati skyline. New Year's Eve. New beginnings. Or new battles. She looked at the email, at the name on the unredacted document. Then she opened her small black notebook, turned to a fresh page, and began to write. The next morning, she walked into Patricia Emerson's office. I need to talk to you about something. Emerson looked up from her desk. Happy New Year to you too. It's not going to be happy. Salome placed the printed email on Emerson's desk. Someone sent me this last night. It's the unredacted version of Exhibit 47. Emerson read the document. Her expression changed. Where did this come from? Anonymous source. Electronically altered voice on a phone call. Untraceable email address. This could be fake, manufactured. It could be. Or it could explain why the original was classified in the first place. Emerson set down the document, looked at Salome. Do you understand what you're suggesting? This person is a sitting state legislator, a member of the Judiciary Committee. Opening an investigation against them would require authorization from Main Justice. It would become political. It would become dangerous. I understand. You'd be making enemies at the state level, powerful enemies, the kind who don't just file bar complaints. I've had enemies before. Emerson studied her for a long moment. The Blanchard case took 7 years. This one could take longer, and you might not win. The higher up the corruption goes, the harder it is to prove. Salome thought about Marcus Avery's letter, about the families who had testified at sentencing, about all the people who had been ground up by a system designed to protect the powerful.
This is a fun place for everyone to discover the
I
great
know,
things about
she
modern
said,
technology in
but
the
if I
fields
don't
of
try, who
agriculture,
will?
animal husbandry,
Emerson nodded
processing
slowly.
technology, and much
I'll
more.
make some calls,
In this channel, we'll
quietly.
explore together
See if
how
Maine
modern
Justice is willing to
agricultural
take a look.
machinery works,
She picked
modern
up the
agricultural
document.
production
But Salome,
processes, and
be
production
careful.
lines 4.0.
Blanchard was one man.
Subscribe
This
to
is
our
a system,
channel, N7
and systems
Discovery,
fight back.
so you don't miss the latest
I know.
videos released daily.
She did know.
Featuring big machines
That was why it
and
mattered.
the most modern farming equipment.
3 weeks later, Salome received authorization to begin a preliminary inquiry. No grand jury yet. No formal investigation. Just quiet questions, careful document requests, subtle inquiries. The first step on what might be a very long road. Langford met her for coffee at a shop far from the federal courthouse. You sure about this? No. She stirred her coffee. But I'm sure about why I'm doing it. That's not the same thing. I know. He studied her, the same way he'd studied her 7 years ago, when she'd walked into that conference room with her notebooks full of documentation. You've changed, Waverly. I've learned. Same thing, maybe. He finished his coffee. I'm in, whatever you need. Just promise me one thing. What? Promise me you'll actually sleep sometimes. You look terrible. She almost smiled. I'll try. The preliminary inquiry lasted 6 months. Document requests, background checks, careful interviews with sources who refused to be identified. The picture that emerged was troubling. Judge Blanchard hadn't been alone. He'd been part of a network, informal, carefully hidden, that stretched back over a decade. Legislators who influenced judicial appointments, judges who ruled in favor of politically connected defendants, contractors who won county bids in exchange for campaign contributions. A system of mutual protection, everyone benefiting, everyone complicit. And at the center of it all, the name from the unredacted email. State Senator Vernon Chase, Judiciary Committee, 12 years, confirmed dozens of judges, including Blanchard. Chase had been careful, smarter than Blanchard. No body cam footage, no obvious paper trail, just patterns of behavior that, when analyzed carefully, suggested coordination. But patterns weren't evidence, and evidence was what they needed. The break came from an unexpected source, a paralegal in Chase's office, 26 years old, quietly disgusted by what she'd witnessed, willing to talk, anonymously, about documents she'd seen, conversations she'd overheard. Salome met her in a parking garage at midnight, clandestine. The kind of meeting that happened in movies. The paralegal was terrified, hands shaking, voice barely above a whisper. I can't testify. He has too many connections. He'd destroy me. I understand. But I can tell you where to look. There's a safe in his private office. Physical documents. The kind he doesn't want digitized. What kind of documents? Records. Payments. Names. The paralegal looked around nervously. He calls it his insurance policy. Says it's the only reason he's still alive. Insurance against whom? I don't know, but if he's that scared, it must be big. The paralegal gave her what details she could, then disappeared into the night. Salome drove home slowly, thinking. A safe full of documents. Insurance policy. Someone even Chase was afraid of. How deep did this go? She presented her findings to Emerson the next morning. We need a search warrant. Based on anonymous testimony from a source who won't come forward, no judge will sign that. Then we need to find another way. There is no other way. Not legally. Salome sat in silence. She'd spent 7 years building cases the right way. Documentation, evidence, due process. Now she was facing a wall. The system protected its own. That had always been true. She just hadn't understood how high the walls went. "What if we could get him to talk?" she said finally. "Chase? Why would he talk?" "Because he's scared." She thought about what the paralegal had said. "He has an insurance policy because he's afraid of someone. What if we could make him more afraid of us?" How? By letting him know we're coming, giving him a choice, cooperate, or become the next Blanchard. Emerson frowned. "That's risky. If he destroys the documents..." "He won't. They're his protection. Without them, he's vulnerable. He'll want to deal." "And if you're wrong?" "Then we lose. But we're losing anyway if we do nothing." Emerson considered this for a long moment. "Make the approach. Carefully. See if he bites." Salome called Senator Chase's office the next day. "This is AUSA Salome Waverly, Public Integrity Section. I'd like to schedule a meeting with the senator regarding a matter of mutual interest." The aide who answered sounded confused. "The senator doesn't typically meet with federal prosecutors without knowing the subject matter. The subject matter is Judge Cyrus Blanchard, and the senator's correspondence regarding what his email called the Waverly problem." Silence. I'll pass along the message." "Please do. My number is on file." She hung up. The return call came 4 hours later, not from an aide, from Chase himself. "Ms. Waverly, I understand you'd like to meet." "I would. May I ask what this is regarding?" "I think you already know, Senator, but I'm happy to discuss it in person. Off the record. No attorneys. Just a conversation." A long pause. "And if I decline?" "Then we proceed through official channels, grand jury subpoenas, document requests, the kind of attention that tends to attract media interest." Another pause. "Tomorrow, 3 p.m., my office in Columbus. I'll be there." She hung up and felt her heart pounding. This was either going to work or it was going to blow up in her face.
So you don't miss the latest videos released daily.
The drive to Columbus took 2 hours. Salome used the time to think, to prepare, to go over every scenario. Chase was smart, powerful, protected, but he was also scared. The paralegal had seen it. The insurance policy proved it. Scared people made mistakes. She just had to find the right pressure point. Senator Vernon Chase's office occupied a corner of the state capitol building. Marble floors, wood-paneled walls, the institutional grandeur of power. A young aide escorted her through security, down corridors lined with portraits of former legislators, to a heavy oak door marked with Chase's name. Inside, Chase himself. 67 years old. Silver hair. The distinguished bearing of a career politician. He didn't offer his hand. "Ms. Waverly, please sit." She sat. Chase remained standing, looking down at her. "I'll admit, I was surprised to receive your call. I thought the Blanchard matter was concluded." "The Blanchard matter is concluded. Judge Blanchard is in federal custody. His co-conspirators have been sentenced or are awaiting trial." "Then why are you here?" Salome met his eyes. "Because I have evidence that Judge Blanchard wasn't acting alone, that he was part of a network that includes individuals at the state level." "Evidence?" Chase's expression didn't change. "What evidence?" "An email, dated February 2018, discussing what the sender called the Waverly problem, recommending escalation to higher authorities." "I don't know what you're referring to." "The email was originally submitted as Government Exhibit 47 in the Blanchard trial. The sender's name was redacted at the request of someone, but I've obtained an unredacted version." Now his expression changed, just slightly, a flicker of something behind the practiced calm. I see. Senator Chase, I'm not here to threaten you. I'm here to offer you a choice. You can cooperate with our investigation, provide testimony, documents, whatever you have that might help us understand the full scope of what happened. In return, we can discuss accommodations. Accommodations. Reduced charges, protection, the kind of treatment that cooperation earns. Or we proceed without your cooperation. Grand jury subpoenas, search warrants, the full weight of a federal investigation. Chase was silent for a long moment. Then he walked to his desk, sat down. Ms. Waverly, do you know how long I've been in politics? 38 years. 38 years. In that time, I've seen a lot of ambitious prosecutors come and go. They all think they're going to change the system, clean up corruption, make a name for themselves. He leaned back. Most of them end up disappointed. The system is bigger than any one person. It protects itself. I know. Do you? Because what you're suggesting, investigating me, investigating people connected to me, that's not going to end with a conviction. That's going to end with your career. Maybe. Maybe. He almost smiled. You're either very brave or very foolish. I've been both, depending on the day. Silence. Chase studied her, the way Blanchard had studied her 7 years ago in courtroom 4B. But this time, she didn't look away. What exactly do you want to know? Everything, starting with who you're really afraid of. Yeah. The conversation lasted 3 hours. When it was over, Salome walked out of the Capitol building with more questions than answers. Chase had talked, carefully, revealing enough to suggest cooperation while protecting himself. The network was bigger than she'd suspected. Not just judges and legislators, county officials, business leaders, people with connections to state contracts, real estate deals, campaign finance, a web of mutual protection stretching back decades. And at the top, someone Chase called the architect. No name, just a title. Someone who had built the system, maintained it, profited from it. Someone even Vernon Chase was afraid of. I can give you documents, Chase had said at the end. Some of them, enough to start pulling threads. But the architect, that's above my pay grade. You want to find them, you'll have to dig deeper than I can help you. Why are you telling me this? Because I'm tired, Ms. Waverly. Tired of looking over my shoulder. Tired of wondering when the whole thing is going to collapse. He'd looked old, suddenly. Diminished. Maybe it's time someone with your particular stubbornness finally pulled back the curtain. She'd left with a promise. Documents within 2 weeks, delivered through intermediaries. And a warning. Be careful who you trust. The architect has eyes everywhere. Salome returned to Cincinnati that night. She didn't go home. Instead, she drove to the federal courthouse, walked through the empty halls, stood in the courtroom where she'd prosecuted Cyrus Blanchard. The bench was empty. The gallery was dark. Just her and the silence. She thought about everything she'd learned, everything that still remained hidden. The Blanchard case had been the tip of an iceberg. Beneath it, decades of corruption, networks of power, systems designed to protect the guilty and punish anyone who challenged them. Could she really take that on? Could anyone? She didn't know, but she knew she had to try. That was what the job meant, what justice meant. Not winning, not certainty, just trying, over and over, no matter how long it took. All. 2 weeks later, the documents arrived, a courier, plain envelope, no return address. Inside, photocopies of financial records, correspondence, internal memos, enough to start. Salome spread them across her desk, began to read, and the next chapter of the investigation began. 6 months later, a federal grand jury in Columbus returned indictments against 3 county commissioners, 2 state legislators, and a regional director of the Ohio Department of Transportation. Senator Vernon Chase was named as an unindicted co-conspirator. The architect remained unidentified. Salome kept digging. The investigation continued. On the one-year anniversary of Cyrus Blanchard's sentencing, Salome received a package. No return address. Delivered to her home, not her office. Inside, a photograph. Her, walking to her car, 3 days ago. And a note. "You were warned. This is your last chance to stop." She photographed the note, logged it as evidence, reported it to Langford. Then she opened her laptop and kept working. The final scene played out on a spring evening, 2 years after Blanchard's conviction. Salome stood at her office window, watching the sun set over Cincinnati. On her desk, a stack of case files, new indictments, ongoing investigations. The network was beginning to unravel, slowly, painfully. 3 convictions, 4 plea deals, dozens of career ends and early retirements. Not the architect, not yet, but progress, real progress. Her phone rang. Langford. "We found something, a financial trail, goes back 15 years, leads to a trust account in the Cayman Islands." "Whose account?" "We're still confirming, but if the preliminary data is right," he paused, "it might be the breakthrough we've been waiting for." Salome looked at the sunset, the gold and red light spreading across the sky. "I'll be right there." She gathered her files, her notebook, the photograph of the surveillance shot that someone had sent to threaten her, and walked out of her office. The fight wasn't over. It might never be over. But she'd learned something in the past 9 years, since that October day in 2017 when Cyrus Blanchard had told her she would never practice law in Hamilton County again. She'd learned that justice wasn't a destination. It was a direction. And as long as she kept moving, kept documenting, kept building cases, kept standing up in courtrooms and telling the truth, she was heading the right way. The elevator doors opened. She stepped inside, and the hunt continued. The call came at 3:17 a.m. Salome's phone buzzed against the nightstand, dragging her out of a dreamless sleep. She reached for it without opening her eyes, muscle memory from too many years of midnight emergencies. "Waverly." "It's Langford. We have a problem." She sat up. Langford didn't call at 3 a.m. for minor issues. "What kind of problem?" "Vernon Chase is dead." The words hung in the darkness. "When?" 2 hours ago. Single vehicle accident on Route 33 outside Columbus. Car went off the road, hit a tree. He was pronounced dead at the scene." Salome was already moving, feet on the floor, reaching for clothes. "Accident." "That's the official determination. But Salome..." Langford paused. "His brake lines were cut. Highway Patrol found it during the initial inspection. They're calling it a homicide now." She stopped. Vernon Chase, the man who had given her documents, who had pointed her toward the architect, who had been cooperating, carefully, reluctantly, with the ongoing investigation. Dead. Who else knows? Highway Patrol, local sheriff. It'll hit the news by morning. The documents he gave us, secured. Everything's in evidence storage. But Salome, if someone killed Chase to stop him from talking, then they know how much he already told us. Silence on the line. Silence on the yay. "I'm on my way to the scene," Langford said. "Meet me there?" 2 hours. She hung up, stood in the darkness of her bedroom, processing. 3 years of investigation, dozens of indictments, a network slowly being dismantled piece by piece, and now the one person who could identify the architect was dead. Coincidence? She didn't believe in coincidence, not anymore. Gay. The accident scene was still taped off when she arrived. Route 33 curved through farmland outside Columbus, empty fields stretching to the horizon under a gray pre-dawn sky. Chase's Mercedes, what remained of it, sat crumpled against a massive oak tree, the front end compressed into a mass of twisted metal. Langford met her at the perimeter. Medical examiner's preliminary report says death was instantaneous. Blunt force trauma to the chest and head. The brake lines? Cut cleanly. Professional job. Whoever did this knew what they were doing. Salome looked at the wreckage. Vernon Chase had been many things. Corrupt. Complicit. A man who had spent decades protecting a system that destroyed lives. But in the end, he had tried to make it right. Or at least he had tried to save himself by helping her. And someone had killed him for it. Security cameras? Nothing on this stretch of road. But we're pulling footage from gas stations, businesses, anything within a 20-mile radius. His phone? Computer? Missing. House was broken into last night. Local police thought it was unrelated until they heard about the accident. A coordinated operation. Kill Chase. Destroy any evidence he might have kept. Professional. Thorough. The architect's work. We need to move faster, Salome said. Whatever Chase knew, someone else knows we're getting close. They're cleaning house. Agreed. But we've hit a wall. Without Chase's testimony, without whatever he had at his house, we find another way. Langford looked at her. You have something in mind? She didn't answer immediately, just stared at the wreckage, thinking. 3 years of careful investigation. 3 years of building cases the right way, document by document, witness by witness. And the architect was still out there, still protected, still killing anyone who threatened to expose them. Maybe it was time to stop being careful. Chase mentioned something once, she said slowly. A backup. Insurance on his insurance. He said if anything ever happened to him, the truth would come out. A dead man's switch? Something like that. He never told me details, said it was safer if I didn't know. Then how do we find it? Salome thought about Chase, his paranoia, his fear. If she were him, if she had spent decades inside a corrupt system, knowing that any day could be her last, where would she hide her secrets? His daughter, she said. Elena Chase. She lives in Chicago. They were estranged for years, but Chase mentioned reconciling recently. Said she was the only person he still trusted. You think he gave her something? I think it's worth asking. The flight to Chicago took 90 minutes. Elena Chase lived in a high-rise apartment in Lincoln Park, the kind of building with a doorman and security cameras and the quiet assurance of money. She answered the door on the third knock. 42 years old, dark hair, her father's eyes, the same sharp intelligence, now clouded with grief and fear. Ms. Waverly, I've been expecting you. You know who I am? My father told me. He said if anything ever happened to him, you'd come. She stepped aside. Please, come in. The apartment was modern, minimalist, white walls, expensive furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lake. Elena led her to a living room where a half-empty bottle of wine sat on the coffee table. I heard about the accident this morning, except it wasn't an accident, was it? No, it wasn't, Elena nodded, as if she'd expected this answer. He was scared, she said quietly. The last few months, every time we talked, he seemed smaller, like he was waiting for something terrible to happen. Did he tell you why? Not directly, but he gave me something. 2 weeks ago, said I should keep it safe. Said if anyone came asking, if you came asking, I should give it to you. She walked to a bookshelf, pulled out a hardcover novel, some bestseller, the kind of book that sat on shelves for decoration rather than reading. Inside, hollowed out, was a flash drive. He said it was everything, Elena said, handing it to Salome. Everything he knew, everything he could prove. He said, her voice cracked, he said it was his confession and his insurance. Salome held the drive carefully, small, plastic, weightless, and potentially the key to everything. Did he say anything else? Anything about who might want to hurt him? Elena shook her head. Just that the truth was bigger than he'd ever imagined, and that he was sorry for all of it. If you're watching this far, drop a comment. because what satisfies you next will satisfy everything. Salome returned to Cincinnati that night. She didn't go to the office, didn't call Langford. Instead, she drove to a secure location, a safe house the FBI maintained for sensitive operations, and inserted the flash drive into an air-gapped computer. The contents loaded slowly. Documents, hundreds of them, financial records, correspondence, photographs, and at the center of it all, a name. Salome stared at the screen, read the name again, and felt the ground shift beneath her feet. Judge Margaret Holloway, Chief Justice of the Ohio Supreme Court. The architect. Shemmed. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Margaret Holloway had been appointed to the Ohio Supreme Court 18 years ago. Before that, she'd served as a state appellate judge. Before that, a prosecutor. Before that, a corporate attorney with connections to some of the largest businesses in Ohio. Her entire career had been a ladder, each rung placed carefully, each promotion engineered. And at every step, she had built her network. Judges who owed their positions to her recommendations. Legislators who received campaign contributions from her connected donors. Business leaders who benefited from favorable rulings and regulatory decisions. A web of corruption spanning decades, hundreds of people, billions of dollars. And Cyrus Blanchard had been just one node in the system. A useful tool. Expendable when he became a liability. Chase's documents laid it all out. Bank transfers, meeting notes, recorded conversations. Chase had worn a wire, apparently, during several meetings with Holloway. The audio was damning. "Vernon, you worry too much. Blanchard was careless. We're not careless. As long as everyone follows the rules, the system works. And if someone doesn't follow the rules, then we handle it. The way we've always handled it. Handle it." The same words Blanchard had used about Salome 7 years ago. The same words that had led to Telford grabbing her wrist in an empty office. The same philosophy. The same system. Just bigger. Salome spent 3 days reviewing the documents. She didn't sleep, barely ate. Just read and reread and built a timeline. Holloway's network had been operating for at least 25 years, possibly longer. The earliest documents in Chase's files dated to 1999, a memo discussing judicial placement strategies for the upcoming decade. The corruption wasn't opportunistic. It was systematic, planned, a long-term project to capture the Ohio judiciary and use it as an instrument of power. And it had worked. Until now. On the 4th day, Salome called Langford. "I need to show you something." The meeting took place at the safe house. Langford arrived with 2 members of his team, trusted agents, vetted multiple times. Salome had insisted on a small group. The fewer people who knew, the better. She walked them through the documents, the recordings, the timeline. When she finished, Langford sat in silence for a long moment. The Chief Justice of the Ohio Supreme Court. Yes. A sitting member of the state's highest court, appointed by the governor, confirmed by the legislature. Yes. Do you understand what you're suggesting? This isn't a county judge. This isn't a state senator. This is one of the most powerful judicial figures in Ohio. Taking her down would require everything we have. I know. Langford rubbed his face. Maine Justice will never authorize this, not without ironclad evidence, not without political cover. We have the evidence. Chase gave us everything. Evidence from a dead man who was himself corrupt. The defense will argue he fabricated it, that he was trying to frame Holloway to save himself. The recordings can be authenticated, but Holloway will claim they're out of context, manipulated. She has resources, Salome, lawyers, political allies. She'll fight this with everything she has. Salome knew he was right. Taking down Cyrus Blanchard had been hard enough, and he had been a mid-level cog in the machine. Margaret Holloway was the machine. So what do we do? Let her get away with it? Langford shook his head. No. We build the case carefully, methodically. We corroborate Chase's documents with independent evidence. We find other witnesses, other sources. We build something so solid that even her lawyers can't tear it apart. That could take years. Yes, it could. Salome looked at the documents spread across the table. Decades of corruption. Thousands of lives affected. A system designed to protect the powerful and crush anyone who challenged them. Years more of investigation. While Holloway continued to sit on the bench, continued to make decisions that affected millions of people, continued to protect her network and eliminate threats. Could she wait that long? Could she afford not to? We do it right, she said finally, the way we've always done it. Document everything. Verify everything. Build something that can't be ignored. Langford nodded. I'll start assembling a team. Small. Trusted. We keep this contained until we're ready to move. And Holloway? We watch her, carefully. If she makes a move, if she tries to clean house again, we'll know. The next 18 months were the hardest of Salome's career. She worked 2 jobs simultaneously. Her official duties as Deputy Chief of the Public Integrity Section, managing cases, supervising attorneys, navigating the bureaucracy of federal prosecution, and her unofficial investigation, building the case against Margaret Holloway, piece by piece, in the shadows. The corroboration process was painstaking. Chase's documents mentioned specific transactions. Salome and her team tracked down the bank records, the corporate filings, the real estate transfers. They matched names to faces to actions. Chase's recordings mentioned specific meetings. They found witnesses who had attended those meetings, flipped some of them with immunity deals, documented their testimony. Slowly the case grew. 100 documents became 1,000. A handful of witnesses became 24. A theory became a prosecution strategy. And through it all, Salome watched Margaret Holloway. The Chief Justice continued her public life unchanged, ruling on cases, attending conferences, giving speeches about the importance of judicial integrity. The irony was suffocating. But Salome waited. Patience was a weapon. She had learned that lesson a long time ago. Chuck. The break came in the spring of her 4th year hunting the architect. A young attorney in the Ohio Attorney General's office, 29 years old, 3 years out of law school, contacted the FBI with information. Her name was Priscilla Odom, and she had proof that Margaret Holloway had obstructed justice in a capital murder case. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button, because what satisfies you next will satisfy everything. Salome met Priscilla in a hotel room outside Cleveland. The young attorney was terrified, hands shaking, voice barely above a whisper. I shouldn't be here. If anyone finds out. No one will find out. I promise. Priscilla took a breath, steadied herself. 3 years ago, I was assigned to a death penalty appeal, State v. Morrison. The defendant had been convicted of killing a state trooper. The evidence was questionable. Eyewitness identification only, no physical evidence. The defendant had an alibi that was never properly investigated. I remember the case. The appeal was denied. Yes, because the Chief Justice intervened. Salome leaned forward. Intervened how? I found new evidence, exculpatory evidence, a witness who could place the defendant 30 miles from the crime scene at the time of the murder. I prepared a brief recommending the conviction be overturned. And my supervisor called me into his office, told me the brief would not be filed, told me the case was closed. When I pushed back, he showed me an email from the Chief Justice's office, instructing him to, quote, ensure the Morrison appeal does not proceed. Do you have a copy of that email? Priscilla reached into her bag, pulled out a folder. I took photographs of everything, the email, the original brief, the evidence that was suppressed. She handed the folder to Salome. The defendant, Terrence Morrison, was executed 6 months later. for a crime I believe he didn't commit. Salome looked at the photographs. An email from a court administrator, forwarded from the Chief Justice's personal account. Clear instructions to bury evidence that might have saved an innocent man's life. This wasn't corruption. This was murder. "Why are you coming forward now?" Salome asked. Priscilla's eyes filled with tears. "Because I can't live with it anymore. I've tried. For 3 years I've tried to forget. Tried to tell myself it wasn't my fault. But every time I close my eyes, I see Terrence Morrison's face. And I know that I could have saved him. If I'd been braver. If I'd fought harder." She wiped her eyes. "When I heard about the investigation, about what you've been doing, I knew I had to help. Even if it costs me everything." Salome reached across the table, took Priscilla's hand. "It won't cost you everything, I promise. We're going to bring her down. And when we do, people will know the truth. About Morrison, about all of it." Priscilla nodded. "What do you need from me?" "Everything. Every document. Every name. Every conversation you can remember." "And then?" Salome looked at the folder in her hands. The photographs, the email, the final piece of the puzzle. "And then we end this." Chalk. The indictment was unsealed on a Tuesday morning in June. Salome stood in the federal courthouse in Columbus, not Cincinnati this time, the case was too big for one district, and read the charges aloud. United States of America versus Margaret Ellen Holloway. Count 1. Deprivation of rights under color of law, in violation of 18 U.S.C. Secular 242. Count 2. Obstruction of justice, in violation of 18 U.S.C. Secular 103. Count 3. Conspiracy to commit murder, in violation of 18 U.S.C. Secular 1117. Count 4. The charges continued. 23 counts in total, spanning 2 decades of corruption. In the gallery, cameras flashed. Reporters scribbled notes. The story was already spreading across news networks, social media, the world. Chief Justice Margaret Holloway, arrested at her home that morning, brought to the courthouse in handcuffs. The architect, finally exposed. Holloway sat at the defense table, flanked by a team of expensive lawyers. She looked smaller than she did in photographs, older, grayer, the imperial bearing diminished by the orange jumpsuit and the reality of her situation. But her eyes were still sharp. And when they found Salome across the courtroom, they held something that looked almost like respect. Almost. "How does the defendant plead?" Judge Crawford asked. Holloway's lead attorney rose. "Not guilty, Your Honor, on all counts. Expected." The trial was set for October, and the fight, the final fight, began. The trial lasted 6 weeks. Salome presented the case methodically, the same way she'd built it. Document by document, witness by witness, Chase's files, authenticated by forensic accountants and handwriting experts, Chase's recordings, verified by audio specialists who confirmed no tampering, Priscilla Odom's testimony, corroborated by the suppressed evidence she had preserved, and dozens of other witnesses, former members of Holloway's network who had been flipped, victims of her corruption who finally had a chance to tell their stories. The defense fought hard. Holloway's lawyers attacked every witness, challenged every document, raised every procedural objection they could think of. But the evidence was overwhelming. On the final day of testimony, Salome called one last witness, the mother of Terrence Morrison. Eleanor Morrison was 73 years old. She walked slowly to the stand, leaning on a cane, her body bent by grief and age. But her voice was clear. "My son was innocent," she said. "I knew it then. I know it now. And for 6 years, I've been waiting for someone to tell the truth." She looked at Holloway. "You killed my boy. Not with your own hands, but you killed him. You buried the evidence that could have saved him.
Place for everyone to
You
discover
let
the
him
great
die
things
for a
about
crime he didn't
nanotechnology in the
commit."
fields of agriculture,
Eleanor
animal
Morrison's
husbandry,
voice cracked.
processing technology, and
I
much
hope you
more.
remember his
In
face
this channel, we'll explore
every night
together how modern
for the rest of
agricultural
your life.
machinery works,
The
modern
courtroom was
agricultural
silent.
production processes,
Salome had no
and
further
production lines
questions.
4.0.
The
Subscribe
jury
to our
deliberated
channel
for
and
4
7
days.
Discovery
On the
so you
afternoon of the
don't miss
4th
the
day, they
latest
returned
videos
with a
released
verdict.
daily,
Guilty.
featuring big
All
machines
23
and the
counts.
most modern farming
The
equipment.
courtroom erupted.
Wish you have a great
Holloway
relaxing moment
collapsed
on
back
this
in her
channel,
chair,
and you
face
will be
ashen.
updated with the latest
Her lawyers
inventions
scrambled to
applied
request
in
polling of the
agriculture.
jury, reconsideration, anything to delay the inevitable. But it was over. The architect had fallen. Sentencing came 3 months later. Salome didn't make a recommendation this time. The crimes spoke for themselves. Judge Crawford reviewed the pre-sentencing reports, the victim impact statements, the scope of the corruption. Then he turned to Holloway. Ms. Holloway, you occupied the highest judicial position in the state of Ohio. You were entrusted with the sacred duty of interpreting the law and ensuring justice. Instead, you built a criminal enterprise that corrupted dozens of public officials, destroyed countless lives, and, in the case of Terrence Morrison, contributed to the execution of an innocent man. He paused. There is no sentence adequate to the harm you have caused, but the law provides guidelines, and I am bound to follow them. He looked at the sentencing memorandum. On count 1, I sentence you to 60 months. On count 2, 60 months, to run consecutively. On count 3. The numbers added up. When he finished, the total was 37 years. Margaret Holloway, 71 years old, would die in federal prison. After the sentencing, Salome walked out of the courthouse alone. The media had finally dispersed. The crowds had gone home. The sun was setting over Columbus, painting the sky in shades of gold and red. She stood on the courthouse steps and breathed. 12 years. 12 years since that October day in 2017, when Cyrus Blanchard had told her she would never practice law in Hamilton County again. 12 years of documentation, investigation, fighting a system designed to protect the powerful. And now, finally, it was over. Or was it? The network was dismantled. Holloway was imprisoned. Dozens of her associates had been convicted or were awaiting trial. But systems didn't die easily. There would be others, other corrupt judges, other networks, other architects building their webs of power. The work was never finished. Justice was never complete. But tonight, just for tonight, she allowed herself to feel something she rarely permitted. Pride. She had done this, not alone, never alone. But she had been the one who kept pushing when everyone else wanted to stop, who kept documenting when the evidence seemed hopeless, who kept believing that the truth mattered, even when the truth seemed impossible to prove. Her phone buzzed. A text from Langford. "Drinks tonight? You've earned it." She smiled. 1 hour, the usual place. She walked down the courthouse steps and felt, for the first time in 12 years, something like peace. 3 months later, Salome received a package. No return address. Delivered to her home, not her office. Her security detail had screened it. No explosives, no biological agents, nothing dangerous. Just a small box. Inside, a black notebook. Not her notebook. A different one. Older. The leather worn, the pages yellowed. She opened it. The handwriting was unfamiliar. Dates from the 1990s, notes about meetings, payments, names, and on the first page, an inscription, "To whoever finds this." I started documenting in 1994. I didn't know what I was recording. I just knew something was wrong. They found out. They came for me. But I hid this. And I hoped, I prayed, that someday someone would find it. Someone who would understand. Someone who would finish what I couldn't. R.T. Salome stared at the initials. R.T. She didn't recognize them. But she knew what this was. Proof that she wasn't the first. That others had seen the corruption, had tried to fight it, had been silenced. And now their work had been passed to her, the next generation. She closed the notebook, set it on her desk, next to her own black notebook. 12 years of documentation, still growing. There would always be more work to do, more networks to dismantle, more architects to expose. But she wasn't alone. She had never been alone. The memorial was small, a plaque in a Cincinnati park near the federal courthouse. Nothing elaborate. Just a simple stone marker with an inscription, in memory of those who sought justice and paid the price for truth. Salome had commissioned it herself, paid for it out of her own pocket. The dedication ceremony was quiet. A few dozen people, former colleagues, victims of the Holloway Network, families of those who had been wrongfully convicted. Eleanor Morrison was there, Terrence's mother. She placed flowers at the base of the marker and stood in silence for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft. "My son can't come back. Nothing can change that. But knowing that his death meant something, that it helped bring down the people who killed him." She wiped her eyes. "That matters. That has to matter." Salome stood beside her. "It matters. I promise you, it matters." Eleanor nodded. Then she turned and walked away. And Salome was left alone with the marker. She read the inscription again, in memory of those who sought justice. How many? How many people over the years had tried to fight the system and lost? How many had documented and testified and been destroyed for their courage? She would never know all their names, but she could honor them by continuing the work, by never stopping. The phone call came that evening. Salome was home, finally resting, when her secure line rang. "Waverly." "Ms. Waverly, this is Director Chen, FBI." She sat up. The FBI director didn't make personal phone calls, not to assistant U.S. attorneys, not unless something significant had happened. "Director, what can I do for you?" "I'm calling to inform you that you've been nominated for a position. Pending Senate confirmation, you would become the next United States Attorney for the Southern District of Ohio." Silence. U.S. Attorney. The top federal prosecutor in the district. The position she had served under for 12 years. I'm honored, Director. But may I ask who nominated me?" "The President, personally. He read the coverage of the Holloway trial, said the country needs more prosecutors like you." Salome closed her eyes. "The confirmation process will be challenging," Chen continued. "You've made enemies. Powerful enemies. They'll use the hearings to attack you." "I understand." "Do you accept the nomination?" She thought about everything she had sacrificed, everything she had survived, the years of documentation, the threats, the fear. And she thought about Terrence Morrison, about Marcus Avery, about all the people who had been ground up by a system that was supposed to protect them. "Yes," she said, "I accept." "Good. The formal announcement will be tomorrow." "Congratulations, Ms. Waverly." The line went dead. The line went. Salome sat in the darkness of her apartment. U.S. Attorney. More power. More responsibility. More ability to fight for the people who couldn't fight for themselves. And more enemies. She walked to her desk, opened her black notebook, turned to a fresh page, and wrote, Day 1.
Thank you for taking the time to watch this video today. If you found the content helpful, please remember to like and subscribe so you won't miss our upcoming episodes. If you have any questions or suggestions, feel free to leave a comment below. We are always here to listen.